Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, January the 23rd, 2026. Today, Mars moves out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. And in this video, I want to look at Mars in Aquarius in some detail. But first of all, I want to consider the broad astrology and I Ching for the day, which is, Friday, January the 23rd, 2026. And here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So as far as this chart is concerned, the moon is just edging into Aries. So the moon moves into Aries. Well, London time, it moves into Aries at 1:26 in the afternoon, sort of after lunch or around lunchtime, early afternoon. So if you are in Europe or Africa, then it's only the last half of the day that has the moon in Aries. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it won't be right until the end of the day that the moon moves out of Pisces. Now, as far as the Americas are concerned, it's really moon is in Aries for most of the day, and particularly if you're on the west coast, and so that does represent a change, and I would have said in some respects a favorable change, because finally we've got a planet in fire signs. That isn't much fire around. In fact, there's no fire around until now. We have the moon in Aries, and so with the moon moving into Aries, there might be just more action, perhaps more things going on to inspire us. It might be sort of easier to just sort of act on the spur of a moment, and overall, it's certainly more dynamic. So that's one thing going on today. Additionally, we have a conjunction between the Sun and Pluto. So the Sun and Pluto make conjunction at around 3.5 Aquarius. This aspect happens approximately once. It does happen once a year, and it's an aspect where we have to consider how Pluto is working. Is Pluto intensifying or is it hiding? Now, you might argue that the Sun is somewhat under the weather in Aquarius. Well, for a start, it's in its detriment in Aquarius, and it's also conjunct Pluto. So with Sun in Aquarius conjunct Pluto, it might just feel that we can't fully express ourselves. There's something that we're just, holding back, and we can't really be at the center of things with Sun conjunct Pluto. And that might be because there are, external forces which might be difficult to understand and difficult to fight against. Though Sun conjunct Pluto can have a different manifestation. It might be just about feeling that we need to assert our power. But we need to be in control. And Sun conjunct Pluto, it's in a fixed sign, it's in Aquarius. There is something rather totalitarian about the sign Aquarius, and so some of us want to be in control. So it's another of those situations where we don't quite know how Pluto is working. Is it working one way, or is it working the other way? Is it working in a sense of being afraid, or is it about being controlling? So there is that contradiction to Pluto. And also we have got the big aspect of the day, or rather the big event of the day, is Mars moving into Aquarius. Now, just before Mars moves into Aquarius, it does make a sextile to Neptune. So Mars sextile Neptune, Mars moving into Aquarius. Well, just before Mars makes the sign change, that sextile to Neptune, may be about what we're interested in, what we want to put our energy into. So, sort of Mars very late Capricorn, sextile Neptune, we may want to put our energy into things that maybe are otherworldly. It could be quite artistic. It could be about the imagination. It could be about deception. trying to create a different image, trying to perhaps be someone we are not. So that's certainly a way in which Mars sextile Neptune could work. And then we've got Mars moving into Aquarius. Mars is where we put our energy. And, we have been putting our energy into Capricorn things. Okay, maybe not us personally, but, other people, the world at large. Mars exalted in Capricorn, great place for Mars to be in. So you might argue that Mars, when it moves into Aquarius, kind of loses some strength. It's no longer exalted. I mean, I'm not saying that Aquarius is a particularly difficult sign for Mars to be in, but it does change where our energy goes, and it's also about our energy moving from one form of Saturn to another. It's sort of, Capricorn is negative Saturn, Aquarius is positive Saturn. So we might want to do things which are very definite, which are constructive, but are very different. And Aquarius can be a sign connected with independence and certainly not following the crowd. And so that might be the best way of using the Mars in Aquarius energy. So perhaps some of us might have felt that we couldn't stick our neck out, that we had to follow what other people were doing. We didn't really want to be individuals because it seemed a bit dangerous, and we also had to think about practical concerns. But now that Mars is in Aquarius, things might be different. We have something to offer. We have something different to offer. And perhaps, if we just do what everyone expects of us, we will be in denial of our fundamental individuality. So it's certainly a change. And we have to see this now in the perspective of, everything else in Aquarius, because now there are 4 personal planets in Aquarius, Mars, Sun, Mercury, Venus, and there's Pluto in Aquarius. So 5 of the usual 10 planets are in Aquarius. So there's a really very big Aquarian emphasis at the moment, and I think that it can be quite useful, provided we're doing Aquarian things. So that's the big event of today, and I just want to, certainly at the end of this video, look at Mars in Aquarius in some detail. I mean, there are other things going on today. I mean, the moon is at 2 degrees Aries, so just before it enters Aries, it makes a conjunction to Saturn at the beginning of the day, and also makes a conjunction to Neptune, and then it changes sign, and at the end of the day we have got the moon making a sextile to the sun. So moon in Aries, sextile sun in Aquarius. So that's quite a dynamic aspect, and it's fire and air kind of relating pretty well to one another. So so that's the picture for the Americas. I mean, it's just a general picture. It applies to all of us, wherever we are at some level. But the Earth is a big place. It's got many time zones, and so if we set that chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is at 23 degrees Pisces at noon on January 23rd today, and so that means that really the moon is going to be in Pisces all day long. The moon is going to be making a conjunction to Saturn, so that moon conjunct Saturn, which in the Americas was kind of at the beginning of the day, really right at the beginning of the day, in Sydney, Australia, is really perhaps dominating the day. So moon conjunct Saturn, and it might be about trying to control things, making sure that that things are all in order, and we don't want our emotions necessarily to be going all over the place. Yeah, it's an emotional day with the moon in Pisces, but moon conjunct Saturn, there might be a desire to sort of control those emotions to some extent, and that might be the right thing to do. Then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And here is a chart that looks like being the chart for January the 23rd, for January the 22nd rather than January the 23rd. So let me just switch that around. So there it is. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, so the sun is, well, the Earth is at 3-4 degrees Leo, and it's opposition Pluto. So, geocentrically we've got Sun conjunct Pluto. Heliocentrically, it's Earth opposition Pluto. It's the same aspect, but looked at in different ways. And I kind of like the idea of an opposition. Earth opposition Pluto. That means, if you think about it, you've got the sun at the center of the solar system. You've got the Earth on one side. You've got Pluto on the other, and the Pluto principle is at odds with how we're feeling down here on planet Earth. There may be strange, disruptive, transformative forces out there that we are not comfortable with, that we're battling with. We're trying to resist them. We'd like things to stay the same. And that's a nice idea, but really, can it happen? I think the answer may be no. And yeah, sure, this Earth opposition Pluto, it does happen every year, but still, when it does happen, it just can be a time of reflection and also a time of fear, because if the Earth is opposition Pluto, there are just some things that we are afraid of, and perhaps we are afraid of change. We can see that the old world, the old order, is breaking up, and we're moving into something new. And some of us, don't like that idea. So that's the overall astrological picture. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, January the 23rd, 2026. Aries. The moon is starting to enter your sign, and that is an important change. There hasn't been any fire recently. No planets in fire signs. Okay, you might say, well, it's true Black Moon Lilith and there's Chiron, but they don't really count. Certainly not in terms of the elemental balance. And so, with a lack of fire, there might have be a certain sort of a lack of inspiration, a lack of dynamism. You wanted things to happen. Aries always wants something to happen. And, Aries often finds itself in the position where it has to be the one to take the initiative. Other people aren't perhaps interested. They're not in the mood. They're distracted. They're afraid, whatever it is. And it's always down to you. And that feeling might have been particularly strong recently with this lack of fire. And, you could try your hardest to get things going, but how easy was it to really see things through, when other people weren't necessarily, in the mood. But now that the moon is moving into Aries, you are feeling better. You're feeling better able to assert yourself and to create action. And you have to look at this also in terms of the broader picture. You have to look at Mars. I mean, Mars is your ruler. On average, Mars takes around 6 weeks to go through a sign, and Mars, perhaps sort of starts today, right at the end of Capricorn. Mars is making a sextile to Neptune, so Mars sextile Neptune. That might say something about your interests, what you are focusing on, and with Mars sextile Neptune, you might have perhaps rather unusual interests, and your imagination is going to be on good form. And I think that you're going to be able to pick up on things that maybe other people miss, of an emotional nature. I mean, I know that Aries is not the most emotional of the 12 signs, but you have a certain sensitivity at the moment. And you can see how things are developing, and you get an idea of other people's feelings and how other people are expressing those feelings, and what it all means, and you might get insights into other people's motivations. And also with Mars sextile Neptune, you might have a chance to sort of work behind the scenes. You don't necessarily have to be in the center of things. I think it's easier now to be in the center of things because the moon is moving into Aries, but it's not necessarily compulsory. With moon moving into Aries, you just feel a sense of being in the right place, and that a feeling that things are happening. And then Mars, having made its sextile to Neptune, it moves into Aquarius. So Mars moving into Aquarius, that is a big move. And we've already got a lot of planets in Aquarius. We've got 4 other planets in Aquarius, Pluto plus Sun, Mercury, Venus. But now that Mars joins them, you feel different. I think that you are very aware of what you have to offer, and perhaps also aware of what makes you different. So if you are with other people, or if you're at least comparing yourself with other people, it might just occur to you that your approach is quite sort of independent-minded. You're not a follower, not really. Perhaps more of a leader, and also your ideas about where things are going, about perhaps your ambitions as well. They're changing as well. You're not just thinking about one thing. You're thinking about several things, and you're thinking about some broader future which you want to align yourself to. Because Aries, as a sign, in some respects, is not that ambitious. I mean, I know that Aries can be very dynamic, but to say that Aries is ambitious is kind of underestimates the depth of Aries. And perhaps many Arians, they want lots of things, and they tend to go beyond things like money and power and status. Not really that they're always going to be ambitious, status orientated Arians, but by and large the average Arian goes beyond that. And with Mars moving into Aquarius, this really is emphasized. Perhaps while Mars was moving into Capricorn, you did have particular ambitions, things you were trying to achieve. Maybe you were successful, maybe you weren't. But now with Mars moving into Aquarius, you're just capable of seeing a broader picture, and you can start to see, what is possible. What might be possible if you were given the opportunity. And you are thinking beyond the material. Of course, Mars has just moved out of an Earth sign and into an air sign, so that really emphasizes this. And the question is, how can you do things differently? And if you can find a way of expressing yourself, well, that's all you need. And overall, as I've already said, with Moon moving into Aries, you are definitely becoming more dynamic and more centered. And as the day progresses, as once the Moon moves into Aries, it starts making a sextile to the Sun in Aquarius. So that's more evidence that you are feeling good about yourself, and you're feeling capable. Perhaps recently you felt that things were blocked. You weren't able to be a fully functioning Aries, but now things have changed. Now things really have changed. So Aries, I think it certainly is a change, and I think it's very much a change for the better. Taurus. The Aquarius emphasis is now getting pretty strong. I mean, Mars is just leaving Capricorn and is entering Aquarius. So that means that we've got 5 planets in Aquarius, and that's quite intense. And of course, one of those 5 planets is Venus. So Venus is your ruler, And so, what does that mean? I think, Taurus, it may say something about, what is important to you. I think that, it very much emphasizes your ambitions, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And it's a time, Taurus, to really cut out your own path. We've all got our own paths. Taurus in particular, it's your path. It's not anyone else's path. It's not a time to be compromising, or well, certainly not a time to be compromising things that are fundamental to you. We all have our own path, and you have to find yours. It's not someone else's. It's not about social acceptability. It's about what matters. And I think that there are a lot of things that matter to you, and there may be one thing in particular right now, Taurus, that you could be quite obsessed about. Remember, you've got 5 planets in Aquarius, 5 planets in fixed signs. There is a great deal of fixity at the moment, and arguably Taurus, of all the fixed signs, is the most fixed. And so, once you decide on a course of action, you're just going to want to see it through. Now, that might be a bad thing. If you decide on a course of action which is too single-minded, which you haven't thought through, it could be destructive. So you need some thought. I mean, you should be able to think with all those planets in Aquarius, planets in air signs. So don't be blind. But at the same time, those who are committed are the ones that get rewarded. The key thing is to be committed to the right thing, and not to be committed to a disastrous course of action. It shouldn't happen, by the way, Taurus. And in the process, your freedom is going to really matter. You should be able to make your own decisions based on perhaps what you've discovered in the past. Maybe recently you have asked yourself questions about, what is your overall direction? Where should you be going? What is important to you? What from a philosophical point of view, how should you be aligning yourself? So, those kind of questions should have been now sorted out, and you can start to think now about, what matters to you. And you certainly now have the impetus. So I think that over the next few weeks, while you've got all of those planets in Aquarius, I think it's very important that you take advantage of it all. I mean, it's not going to be a situation that lasts forever. And I should remind you that Venus eventually will move into Pisces. And so that's something we need to slowly start to think about. So I just want to tell you when Venus moves into Pisces exactly. I should have worked that out beforehand. So Venus moves into Pisces. I make it on, looks like it's the 10th of February. Yeah, 10th of February at 10:19 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So, between now and the 10th of February, while you've got all of these planets in Aquarius, do make the most of it. It's not that things are going to be bad after the 10th of February. After the 10th of February, Venus moves out of Aquarius, moves into Pisces. Pisces is, of course, a sign where Venus is exalted, so don't worry. It's nothing to be afraid of, but the challenges will change once Venus moves into Pisces. And right now the challenge is to do what is important to you, and really to give it everything you've got. Now, it may be a case, Taurus, that you shouldn't always be making your own decisions based just on your views, just on what you know. It is possible that you get some encouragement or some support, or indeed you respond to another person. So that we may be talking about another person who is supportive, someone who encourages you to do something, or indeed a person who annoys you and challenges you, but in a way that might be quite constructive. And so if you come across someone, perhaps over the next couple of days, who is different from you, is pushing a particular view that seems rather unusual, then don't just resist it. It might be that with another person's help, they may not be trying to help you. It just may be that their mere presence is helping you, even if they don't like you, even if they don't wish you well. You can still react to them. So we may be talking about someone who is a catalyst for your future actions. And so if you are feeling, despite everything I've said, listless, you feel there is nothing going on, you don't feel any sense of direction, you feel that you're going nowhere. I mean, I hope that's not the case, but if it were to be the case, then it just may be that something happens, or someone arrives on the scene, or someone challenges you, and your response can be very useful. So if you can't get it together yourself, maybe some outside assistance, consciously or unconsciously, can make all the difference. Gemini. Well, we've got now a ton of planets in Aquarius. We've got 5 planets in this sign. So from your perspective, Gemini, that is good. I mean, Aquarius is an air sign, and so when you've got so much emphasis in Aquarius, that sort of may encourage you to sort of change direction ever so slightly, and to sort of realize that you have got opportunities which in the past might not have been there, and perhaps in the recent past there were certain things that you were taking too seriously. You were thinking them through, and you were wondering about what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and you were kind of you were feeling that things were perhaps a bit difficult, and now things are changing. You're becoming more open-minded. I mean, you are Gemini, of course, an open-minded person, but I think with all these planets moving into Aquarius, it's just making you more and more open-minded, and you're starting to see possibilities that just weren't there before. Because that can be how the Gemini mind works. The Gemini mind can go very quickly, and it can move from one thing to another, but it can get attracted to certain things, and it can analyze certain things, and it can forget about the alternatives. I mean, I know that Gemini is supposed to be really open-minded, is prepared to sort of go all over the place. But if there is a distraction, and if something bothers you, and particularly if it's of an emotional nature or something troubling you, then your mind can go into overdrive, and your mind can go into overdrive only in one direction. It kind of doesn't sound like the typical Gemini view, but it is the way it can sometimes work for Geminis. But now that Mars is moving out of Capricorn and into Aquarius, I think that you are just feeling better about things, and you can see that now finally that there are all sorts of possibilities, and these are possibilities that you want to follow. And it's not just Mars in Aquarius. You've got Mercury in Aquarius as well, and you're in a mood for sort of exploring. And of course, of all these planets in Aquarius, some Geminis may feel that it's a good time to be traveling or to know more about other parts of the world. Certainly this Gemini has no plans on traveling, but it might be that you feel that there are places you want to go, and you might want to do some exploring in this direction. Yes, see what is possible, because perhaps you feel that where you are right now is is just not sufficiently stimulating. I think you would perhaps have a slightly erroneous impression there, because the excitement and the stimulation, it is there, but you just have to look for it. And perhaps when Mars was in Capricorn, you couldn't see it, but now that it is, now we've got all these planets in Aquarius, you can start to see things in a new, different, and certainly more exciting and vibrant way. So overall, Gemini, things are looking good, and don't forget other people. I mean, the moon is changing sign. The moon is moving into Aries. So with the moon moving into Aries, you're able to make some effort to consider other people, to perhaps also even to be dynamic. You can perhaps it might have felt, Gemini, recently there just wasn't enough energy. There were a lot of ideas. Your mind was drifting here, there, and everywhere, but where was it all going? There just wasn't a focus. But now with the moon in Aries, there is a focus, and I think in many respects you are able to provide this focus. You can be yourself, and you can come over as someone who is exciting. Geminis, of course, are always exciting people, but I think that with moon moving into Aries, making a sextile to the sun, you can sort of bring your ideas into the open, perhaps in a new way. And I think that people will really sort of appreciate, whatever it is that you've got to offer. And I do think, Gemini, that right now you have actually got quite a lot to offer. And finally, there is relationships. Well, as far as relationships are concerned, there's no doubt that there's something about you that is difficult to ignore. You have the appearance of being intense. I don't think you necessarily are intense, but you just might give that impression. It may be just through the things you say or what you're wearing. There's just something about you that is different, and you may even have a certain sort of darkness or a sort of a riskiness to you. Again, I'm not saying it's necessarily real, but it might be what you're presenting, and that might, in certain quarters, make you quite interesting to certain people. So, if you want to have an influence, Gemini, if there's some particular person you're trying to influence, then I think you actually can be quite successful. Cancer. The moon is moving into Aries, moving out of Pisces and into Aries, and I think that does suggest some kind of change. I mean, the important point here is that the moon is moving into a fire sign, and that's going to impact all of us. But with the moon and moon moving into a fire sign, there's just more action. People are better able to take the initiative and do things which are quite inspirational, and that applies to you. And so, but maybe the way it works, Cancer, is that you have been trying to work something out. You've been trying to build something, and you've been looking at one thing, you've been looking at other things, you've been looking at people with different ideas, and you've been trying to sort of balance it all out. And you had some decisions to make, and you had to decide what your particular stance was. And now, with the moon moving into Aries, you're feeling more definite. You feel more sure of yourself, and you feel more inspired, because there is something inspired about this sign Aries, and you feel that you're able to be dynamic. And you certainly are dynamic if you make the effort. Now, some Cancerians might not want to make the effort, but if you can make the effort, if you can really, be yourself and be open about what you feel, then I think that you really will have an impact. So that's one way of looking at the day. I think it would be a shame if you were to do nothing. And I'm not just talking about today, I'm talking about tomorrow as well, because the moon is just moving into Aries. Indeed, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon won't go into Aries until really basically tomorrow. So do be prepared to have more of an impact. And this is also shown by the structure of the chart. If you look at the Cancerian chart, you put for example, you put Cancer on the left-hand side of the chart, like I've got it here. You will notice that all of the planets, well, except for Jupiter, are kind of above the horizon. Okay, it's not really above the horizon because this is not an ascendant chart, but they're at the top part of the chart. They're in a part of the chart which is more aligned to the outside world. And this isn't just about today. This is really about the next few months even. But it's kind of moving towards the peak, slowly. I mean, as you move towards, well, the northern hemisphere spring, the southern hemisphere autumn. It is time to be having an impact. It's not a time just to be withdrawing or to closing things down. That's really not what it's about. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to be completely free and open and tell everyone what's on your mind and tell everyone about your deeper plans. No, not really, because we do have a lot of planets in Aquarius. Mars has just gone into Aquarius, and Aquarius means that for you, there are still things that you are holding back on. You realize that certain situations are excessively complicated, too complicated, and or at least they might seem to be too complicated, and there's a slight danger that you over-emotionalize with Mars moving into Aquarius. And it might be a situation that on the surface seems to require an emotional approach, but actually it's not really about an emotional approach. It's just about doing some deep thinking rather than deep feeling. I mean, there is a difference. A lot of analysis here is required. With all of these Aquarius planets, and and particularly now that Mars is moving into Aquarius, and you really want to get to the bottom of things, and you can, and you don't want your process of analysis necessarily to be disturbed by having to explain what you're thinking. So if you're beginning to think something, you're beginning to reach a conclusion, it might not be a good idea to always share your thought processes, because your thought processes may be disrupted. But I don't want to overcomplicate things. I think that right now you should be focusing on the moon moving into Aries, whether it's today or tomorrow. And the moon, when it moves into Aries, does make a sextile to the sun. So with moon sextile sun, you have a chance to really bring to bear the power of your personality. And you shouldn't be afraid of being yourself, and you shouldn't be afraid of setting an example. I mean, you can go further than setting an example. You can maybe tell people what to do. I think if you're honest and upfront, and you're able to justify your opinions, I think people will be inclined to follow your lead. Leo. Big build up now in Aquarius. Aquarius is, of course, your opposite sign, and you've got Mars moving into Aquarius. And Mars moving into Aquarius could be a problem. I think the issue with Mars moving into Aquarius is that Mars is quite an aggressive energy. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so if Mars is moving into your opposite sign, that might say something about other people and how you relate to them and how they relate to you. And Mars in Aquarius might be an irritation. There's something happening with other people that you don't actually particularly like. It could be someone annoying you, and it could be someone who you know very well who is annoying you. And so the question is, how do you respond to the situation? And remember that Mars is a planet of assertion, and the question is, are you being assertive enough? And if you are doing nothing, or if you are not pulling your weight, then that can create an opposite reaction. Then if you don't do something, then you're creating a situation where another person does do something. So if you see someone behaving in a way that you don't like or you don't appreciate, or someone saying something you don't like, what is actually going on? It's not just about your immediate reaction. It's perhaps about what you are not doing and what you are projecting, because projection is such an important thing now with all of those planets in Aquarius. And with Mars moving into Aquarius, there's just some danger that you project your own frustrations. You're not doing something, someone else is doing it, and maybe you resent the fact they're doing something that you're not doing, and there may be a reminder of your inactivity. I mean, Leo is a sign that is supposed to be active, it's supposed to be at the center of things, it's positive, it's a fire sign, but there's some danger here that you might be giving things away, letting other people make the decisions, not because you want to, but because you just, at a psychological level, it's just easier, it's more straightforward, and that's how it is. So that's something you need to watch. And if you do find yourself getting annoyed with someone or having bad feelings about someone, just ask yourself, what actually is going on. And there may be a psychological process evolving, and the more aware you are of it, I think the better. Though, as I've already said, Mars just might represent another person. Because it's Mars, more likely to be male than female, and it could be female, but Mars in Aquarius, it's quite a masculine energy, and so Mars might represent one particular person who you are paying attention to. They could be causing trouble. They might be making you angry. I mean, they might be someone new arriving on the scene. You don't see them at first, but they have arrived, and that might be how we see Mars moving into Aquarius. It is an arrival, someone turning up, someone who is capable of being noticed, and what you have to do perhaps is to open your eyes. Now, continuing on the theme of other people, I think at the moment, Leo, you are quite effective in a social sense. I think that you know how to present yourself, you know how to moderate your looks and your appearance in such a way that you come over in the absolutely best possible light. And it's not just about the way you appear, it's also what you say. And the things you say at the moment, Leo, can be powerful, and they can be effective. And if need be, Leo, at the moment you can be a very effective arguer. So if there's something you want, something you're trying to explain, then you're going to be very effective in terms of putting forward your point of view and coming up with reasons why you are right and perhaps why everyone else is wrong. So don't doubt your arguing power. Don't doubt your ability to change people's minds about important subjects. Virgo. There may at first seem to be some annoyances, just things happening that you don't fully appreciate, and your immediate reaction might be quite negative. You're thinking, well, this is not good. But if you think about it again, maybe it's actually not so bad, and it could be a case that what starts off as being sort of rather negative could be transformed, and you can perhaps transform the way you function, and the way you use your energy. And this is linked with the fact that Mars is moving into Aquarius. Now, on the surface, Mars moving into Aquarius for the average Virgo is not particularly good news. I mean, Aquarius is a sign which is very different from Virgo, completely different. It's an air sign. You're an earth sign. It's fixed. You're mutable. It just seems just not good. And probably when you're thinking about all these planets moving through Aquarius, you may not be very happy about it if you have some awareness of astrology. But there is another way of looking at it, and it goes like this. It would say, well, Aquarius is the sixth sign from Virgo. So if you count Virgo 1, Libra 2, Scorpio 3, Sagittarius 4, Capricorn 5, Aquarius 6. So in other words, there's a kind of a sixth house feel to Aquarius. Now, Mars joys in the sixth house in traditional astrology. So Mars joys in Aquarius from a Virgo perspective. And what does that mean? Well, Mars is, it's an energy planet. It is high energy, but in the sixth house, it's about sorting things out, making sure that everything is done properly, and there's a lot of action here. And so, Virgo, if you're in a situation where everything is chaotic, things are upside down, you're not quite sure where things are going, then Mars moving into Aquarius may enable you to really cover a lot of ground. And once you decide you want to do something, you're just going to be very persistent. You will keep moving. You will keep acting. You will keep clearing things up. You will not allow yourself to be blocked. So if there's anything you want to create, then you can certainly do it. And you create it through just sheer willpower. And you know how you want things to be organized. So the organization principle right now really is very, very important. And in the process, I don't think anyone is going to seriously resist you. It's going to be very clear, what you want, how you want things to turn out. And I don't think there's going to be, much in the way of opposition. And perhaps part of what's going on is that you could be quite obsessed. And now obsession is a word that often has negative connotations, but I think sometimes it's good to be obsessed. You get upset because you get obsessed about something. It means that you're single-minded and you get things done. You get things done. Okay, maybe not quickly, but once you start, you keep going. You keep going until the very end, until the finishing line. So that gives you the power, and it is the organizing power. And it might be fueled by obsession, but but the key thing is you get results, and that's what matters. Now, where do other people fit in this? Do you have to worry about other people? Do you have to worry about relationships? Well, there is a conjunction between Moon and Saturn today in Pisces. I mean, that Moon Saturn Pisces, particularly strong if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia. Not quite so strong if you're in the Americas, but with Moon Saturn conjunction in Pisces, your opposite sign, it just may feel at times that other people are not necessarily being very helpful, particularly if you're doing things their way and you're listening too hard to them. I think it's better, Virgo, that you take the initiative. I know that the South Node is in Virgo, and so normally one says that Virgos should pay some attention to what other people do, what other people want. But I think that right now, it's important to put your own interests first. And another thing, Virgo, is that if you've got anyone doing any work for you, I don't know whether it's temporary work. I don't know. Maybe you're in a position to hire staff and servants. I'm sure you're not, but if you happen to be, then that might be irrelevant today. And it's actually a good time to be thinking about who is doing the work for you. If someone is doing a half an hour job for you for whatever reason, the dynamic there could be quite important. I think it's very important that you make it clear what you want. You have to be. You mustn't leave things to chance. You mustn't assume that someone understands what you want. You have to make it clear, very clear, even if that means labouring the point, because that perhaps is your strength at the moment. You can be quite obsessive, and you might be afraid that you come over to other people as being obsessive, but you shouldn't be afraid of being obsessive right now. I think, as I've kind of suggested, that right now it is actually good for Virgos to be slightly obsessed, because it means you'll get results, and it means that you'll be able to see things through to the end, and also it means that other people will clearly understand you. Libra. It's a day when the sign Aquarius has a certain completeness. Okay, it may not be today, it may be tomorrow. Completeness in the sense that Mars is now changing signs. Mars is now in Aquarius, and it's in an air sign, and so you've got the fullness there. Fullness as in having five planets in Aquarius, and Libra gives you an understanding of what you can do, what is actually possible, and it should occur to you that there's really a huge amount you can do, especially now that Mars is moving into Aquarius. So Mars moving into Aquarius gives you the impetus to be independent minded, to think about what is important to you, and also makes you think about what is it that you enjoy. And so as a Libran, you sometimes try to make other people happy, you try to make a good impression, but you can take things too far. It's all about you fundamentally. And I think that with Mars moving into Aquarius, particularly as it's moving towards a conjunction of Pluto, this is a time, Libra, where you start to have real insights into your power and into your agency. You being the agent, you're not determined by other people's decisions, other people's actions. It's all about you deciding what is important, and in the process you may be aware of some of the things that have recently been holding you back. Some of those things holding you back could have been figments of your own imagination. You thought you had to make people happy. You thought you didn't want to rock the boat, but now it's occurring to you that no, it is all about you. And I think that you may have a chance today, or perhaps tomorrow, to liberate yourself from something. Then there may have been just something in particular that was really restricting you, really holding you back, and you may not have been quite sure how to deal with it. But now you have an opportunity to look at it again and realize that it's nothing. You can just walk away from it. You might, in the process, upset people, but it doesn't matter. If something is holding you back, Libra, if you're tied by obligations that you don't appreciate, then yeah, it might be time to make the break. Though I'm not saying, Libra, that you should totally disregard other people, because the moon is moving into Aries. So this morning, moon moves into Aries, American time. If you're in Europe, early afternoon, moon moves into Aries, and so that is a change. And with the moon moving into Aries, you certainly have the ability to understand other people's role. You can also see how other people are using their power, or perhaps misusing their power. And I said earlier that it is a time for Librans to be independent, but independent doesn't mean blinkered. You have to open your eyes enough to see what people are doing, and I think that with moon in Aries, you can see it, and you can see perhaps how certain people are trying to push things. Maybe they're trying to get something out of you, but you can see it. And the moon is making a sextile to the sun late in the day, and moon sextile sun for you, Libra, I think that is quite fortunate, and it does indicate that you can find the right relationship. Or at the very least, you can find an accord with someone. Maybe you and someone else had a slight difference of opinion, but moon sextile sun, it's a very harmonious aspect, and perhaps it's about someone finally understanding and appreciating what you have to offer, and you are able to do things that are important to you, but these things can also be of benefit to other people, and perhaps the moon sextile sun will facilitate this sort of mutual respect, and can allow you to come to an important agreement. Scorpio. Mars is, of course, a very important planet to Scorpios. I mean, Mars is your ruler. And so with Mars being your ruler, we do have to monitor it. And Mars is changing sign. Mars is moving into Aquarius. So it could be argued, Scorpio, that the whole way you present yourself has a certain Aquarian feel to it. When you think about Aquarius, you think about being sort of independent-minded, doing things your way, not compromising, but at the same time, being open to new ideas. When you're thinking about Aquarius, sometimes you think about Aquarius, you can think about saying, well, Aquarius would say, well, having considered all ideas, all possibilities, I know that I'm right. So that can be a feature of Aquarius. So it can be a kind of closed-minded kind of open-mindedness, if that makes any sense. I know that sounds rather sort of contradictory, but with Mars moving into Aquarius, you start to have a very clear sense of who you are, and what is important to you. And it might relate to your particular stance, maybe an intellectual stance. You have an idea about where you fit in, how you fit in. You have an idea about what society is all about. It might have a political angle to it. Aquarius is quite a political sign, because to think about politics, you have to think about how people come together. You have to think about the possibility that maybe the group is more important than the individual, and that can be a feature of Aquarius. Maybe the totalitarian side to Aquarius, not focusing on individual rights. It's more important that you think about society as a whole. And so with Mars moving into Aquarius, you might be thinking about society as a whole, and what's right and what's wrong, and probably, Scorpio, you're not really in the mood to compromise. Because Aquarius is a fixed sign. You have your ideas, and that's it. Although Mars is making a sextile to Neptune, so that's kind of quite interesting. So just before Mars moves into Aquarius, right before it makes a sextile to Neptune. So that sextile to Neptune will continue even after Mars moves into Aquarius, and it does give you a certain flexibility. It does give you an ability to understand things that aren't always obvious to other people, and it can represent emotions. It can represent sensitivity, about you, understanding what is important to other people. But there's also an artistic side to it. Mars is not just your ruler, it's what you want to put your energy into. So if Mars is sextile Neptune, you might want to put your energy into doing something that is very creative, that relates to your imagination, and doing something which is unique to you, but at the same time, Neptune is a collective planet. It represents what is going on, out there in the collective, and maybe you can bring it down to earth and make it individual. So perhaps it's about taking something which is completely non-individual, represented by Neptune, and making it personal. And so maybe that's something you can do with Mars sextile Neptune. But once Mars is in Aquarius, it's going to be in Aquarius for 6 weeks, and it's just a time when you can really think about what is important to you, and you can really start to think about your priorities, and in the process you have a great sense of your own individuality. And so there's a lot for you to sort out, and over the next few days, it just may be a time where things have to be realigned. Certain things aren't perhaps relevant anymore, and certain things have to be altered because they're not in the right place anymore, because things have changed. And so the next couple of days for you, Scorpio, just may be a process of readjustment. Sagittarius. Moon is going into Aries. I mean, there are other things going on, but I think Moon going into Aries is relevant because the Moon is, of course, going into a fire sign, and so Sagittarius is a fire sign, and having a Moon in fire just gives you the energy that perhaps recently you've been lacking. So I've been talking about Aquarius over the last few days in ways which were not entirely positive. I was suggesting that Sagittarians hadn't been completely committed to whatever was going on, and they might have had their doubts. But now that the Moon is going into Aries, I think you're going to be feeling better, and you're going to be feeling more positive and more optimistic and more capable. This idea that you really can get things done, and that you can really have an impression, make an impression. And additionally, we've got Mars moving into Aquarius. So Mars, joins Pluto, Sun, Mercury, Venus in Aquarius, and Aquarius is a sign which has a good relationship to Sagittarius. And so with Mars moving into Aquarius, you are certainly able to express yourself and communicate what is important to you with power and vigor and perhaps intensity as well. And so perhaps Sagittarius, you've got quite a lot to say. I mean, at least on a sort of an inspirational level. I don't think it's especially emotional. Not really. In fact, if you are dealing with things on an emotional level, if you're trying to relate to other people on an emotional level, it might not necessarily work out, because you might come over as being sort of rather cold and disinterested. You're not cold and disinterested, by the way, but it just might be the way you come over if you're having to do things which are heavily emotional. I mean, I don't think really you want to deal with people who are distressed, at least in a sort of a passive way. I mean, I think that your approach, if you're dealing with someone who is distressed for whatever reason, someone who is, for example, trying to dump their problems onto you, I think your approach would be, quite logical, quite dynamic. You do this, you can get yourself together like this, stop emoting, to really have to deal with someone emotionally and try to be emotional yourself. I don't think you would sort of carry that very well. So I would suggest that emotional interactions should be avoided. You can still interact, but interaction can work on many different levels. But the emotional side of things, at the moment, certainly the emotional interpersonal side of things should possibly be downplayed. Now, with Moon in Aries, that you can still enjoy other people's company. You can enjoy other people's company in a sort of a one-to-one level. There's something exciting about you, and you can bring out the best in other people, but on a non-emotional level. So so one-to-one relationships, they can work fine, provided they just don't become too intense, too serious. Because I just don't think that right now you're in the mood for that kind of thing. You want to keep things light, and you want to keep things moving. Getting involved with emotion right now I don't think that would be such a good thing. Capricorn. Well, there are now no planets in Capricorn. Mars is leaving Capricorn, so Capricorn is now an empty sign. And, maybe from your perspective, you might be a bit sad, and it was always good when you had all that attention, but, it could just have become a bit much. Maybe there were just too many things for you to do, too many things to worry about. It was perhaps, always you having to make things happen. And, maybe now that Mars has left Capricorn and has moved into Aquarius, some of the pressure is off, and you can perhaps, do things, in your own way, at your own pace. And I think that it's helped by the fact that the moon is moving into Aries. So that's kind of quite interesting. As Mars moves out of your sign, the moon moves into Aries, a sign which is, right at the bottom of your chart. And, while the moon is moving into Aries, it may feel that there are just things that you need to attend to. Perhaps you'd forgotten yourself. It was always about other people. It was always about what you had to do, what you had to create. Other people weren't really able to take the initiative. So it might have been exhausting. And now that the moon is moving into Aries, you have a chance to calm down. There's nothing that that necessarily has to be done, although when you look around you, it might be the case that a few mistakes have been made. There are some things that just need to be dealt with. With Mars moving into Aquarius, it can be a time to be thinking about money. And I mean, I've mentioned this quite a lot. The fact that there is a sort of an increasing financial emphasis now as all these planets move into Aquarius. And this is happening at a time when there aren't any planets in Earth signs, except for Uranus and Taurus. So you always could rely on Mars being in Capricorn being an Earth sign, but now Mars has moved out of Capricorn. This lack of Earth might actually make you be thinking about Earth. Suddenly the material is important. It can't just be ignored. And perhaps, Capricorn, you need to work on financial matters in your own way, being very dynamic about it, being very thorough, and being able to cover a lot of ground quickly, but just keeping in mind what is important to you, and it's not a race. And Mars does stay in Capricorn for a long time, or for 6 weeks or so, and so from a financial perspective, just having another look at everything, in your own way, at your own pace. It doesn't have to be done in company or with another person's support or approval. You don't have to look for validation from elsewhere, and that might be a good thing to do. And also, Aquarius, question other people's financial advice, or for example, you may have taken certain financial things for granted. Maybe you were told something decades ago, years ago, and you just assumed that everything was fine and that that's the way it should be. But maybe things are changing. Maybe things in the world are changing. Things in society are changing. Maybe the last time you gave serious consideration to money, you were a bit younger. It doesn't matter what your age is now, but some of your priorities might have changed. So that might be a constructive way to look at money. And doing things on your own, by the way, at the moment, may not be such a bad thing, because if you do get involved with other people, it may just feel that something's wrong. I'm not talking so much about people on a sort of a one-to-one level, but just people in general. They seem to have strange priorities, and they just may be concerned about things that you regard as being just not right, and even morally not right. And perhaps, Capricorn, it's a time when at some level you may be attracted to people who have a moral compass that is all over the place, and they may be interested in things which really shouldn't be touched. So do carefully consider what other people are like before you get to know them. So if you're dealing with strangers, or strangers are getting closer to you, or maybe you've started to talk to someone you've met on the internet, for example, do think about what you're doing, because right now there's some possibility that Capricorns may be sort of attracting strange company. And maybe this underlines my point, that it is a time to be sort of independent. The pressure is not on you. It shouldn't be on you. What you don't want to do is create pressure where none needs to exist. So, do things in your own way, do things you're comfortable with. And if something seems dangerous, or someone seems dangerous, then probably a good idea to give them, a clear berth. Aquarius. It's now Aquarius season majorly, because we have got Mars moving into Aquarius. They've got 5 planets in Aquarius, and that means that the focus is on you. It's your turn, and this emphasis in Aquarius, will persist for some time. I mean, I think that Venus moves out of Aquarius on February the 10th. So that's what, 3 weeks or so. So it is a time, Aquarius, when you need to be thinking about yourself and your own priorities, and perhaps also how you are different. Because being an Aquarius, you tend to be quite independent-minded, but that independent-mindedness is particularly powerful, at the moment. And so, if there is anything that you want to express or want to do, then I would have said go ahead, because I think that you're going to really sum up the spirit of the times. People need a change. People are looking to the future. They want to know what the future is going to bring, and you may be, just the person to to bring the future down to earth. You can almost be like Prometheus, bringing the fire down to your fellow humans, and just showing them what is possible. And with Mars moving into your sign, well, that certainly makes you assertive. You absolutely know how to look after your own interests. And of course, Mars is starting to move towards a conjunction with Pluto. So over the next few days, Mars moving towards that conjunction of Pluto means that you have a very strong sense of who you are. And if you're not happy with the way things are developing, then, well, you're in a position to create real change, quite sort of spectacular change. Things can be like changed overnight. They can be turned upside down. And so you certainly don't have to be satisfied with the status quo. And, it's not just Mars moving into Aquarius. I mean, today we've got Sun making a conjunction to Pluto. And again, that allows you to demonstrate your power. But that Sun conjunct Pluto may also say something about how certain other people are behaving. It's not just you that is interested in power. I mean, Aquarius and that Sun conjunct Pluto, affects everyone. It might affect some people in your life who are important, and you might find that, not everyone is compliant, that some people are digging down and are actually quite sort of intense. And if this has been happening quite a lot, I think, you mustn't underestimate other people, the people you have to deal with, particularly the people you have to deal with all the time, the people you know well. Don't underestimate them, and you just don't know what's going on in their mind. You can try, but one human being can never know what's going on in another human being's mind, however hard they try. And so it's important not to underestimate the power of another person's feelings, and also not to underestimate the power of another person's desires. It's easy to think, that you're the only one who's got plans. I mean, it's very human, isn't it? I mean, I'm a terrible chess player, but I do sometimes play chess, and I think the problem about playing chess is that you're trying to win this game, and it doesn't occur to you that the person you're playing is also trying to win the game as well. It's not just about you; it's about the other person as well. So, think about what strategies another person is planning, because they're planning something. And they've got things that are important to them. So yeah, there are things that are important to you. If you've got priorities, that means another person has got priorities as well. So don't think that you are in isolation. You are not. And what other people are thinking and planning might have an impact on you. And the more aware you can be of all this, I think the better. And do consider the possibility that some people's ideas are not necessarily going to work in your favor, that some people might have priorities which could actually be quite dubious. I'm probably not talking about people you know well, but people you are just coming into contact with may not be as trustworthy as they seem. So I think it's actually a bad time to be trusting someone that you've met for the first time, on whatever level, in whatever capacity, because you just don't know. You don't know what their true motivations are, and it might take time for this information to be revealed. Pisces. Well, there's, broadly speaking, quite a lot happening in the sense that, we've got Mars moving into Aquarius, and we've got the Sun conjunct Pluto. These are all sort of important aspects. But the question is, does it really affect you? And just because things are heavy, things are unfolding at a fast pace, is it relevant? Well, it might not be relevant. It just might be something you are observing, although it is true that Mars is making a sextile to Neptune. So Mars, just before it moves into Aquarius, right at the end of Pisces, makes a sextile to Neptune. I mean, that sextile to Neptune is still in force after Mars moves into Aquarius. And so, Mars sextile Neptune is an aspect that is relevant to you. You've still got Neptune in your sign, and so Mars sextile Neptune might sort of trigger your sort of imaginative capacities. Your feelings may be going one way, the other way. At first, you might be not quite sure what's going on, but maybe you're actually picking up on something important, something that relates to the world at large. And of course, Neptune is pretty close to Skeet. I mean, Skeet is a fixed star connected with disaster, water damage. And it's sextile Mars. I'm not saying that you're going to be involved with a disaster, but you might just be aware of just how things could go wrong, and that could be a good thing. I mean, it may be the case, for example, Pisces, that if you have a bad feeling about what another person is doing, so you hear that someone has got plans, they're very excited about it, you might sort of just know that this is not going to go right. So if you do get a premonition about something going wrong, I think affecting someone else, probably a friend. I'm not even thinking about your family. More likely, just someone. Maybe you don't even know them well. They just talk about their plans, and you just have a feeling that they shouldn't be doing it. So maybe Pisces, it's a good time for giving warnings. Although Pisces, you might find yourself being cast in the Cassandra role. Cassandra, the Trojan prophetess who was cursed. No one would listen to her. She was always accurate, but no one would listen to her predictions, which is kind of unfortunate. But I'm not saying that you're going to be like that. I mean, I think that you have the capacity to get people to see sense. And at the beginning of the day, also, there's a conjunction between the Moon and Saturn. That's before the Moon goes into Aries, and that Moon conjunct Saturn could be quite helpful. It gives you gravitas, it gives you discipline, and the Moon is pretty close to a trine to Jupiter. So I think that you can come over as being a serious person, and I think that in the end, your words and perhaps your warnings will be listened to. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 51, which is thunderbolts. So thunderbolts is really a very fiery hexagram. We have got two trigrams, one on top of the other, and this hexagram is about something suddenly happening. It's about a shock, and this shock on the surface seems bad. It seems as if everything is coming to an end. But, the advice with this hexagram is not to panic. We can continue doing, whatever we've been doing in the past. We can just continue doing it, and it will be okay. So those sort of routines and rituals that we've got used to, it might seem that they're going to come to an end because of some shock to the system. No, we can carry on, and the implication here is that this shock, whatever it is not necessarily such a bad thing. It just has to happen, and maybe things were rather stuck, and there are no moving lines here. So if you're thinking about that, that's a kind of bit of a contradiction, because you think about thunderbolts, you think that there has to be action. Thunder blasts forward. There's your moving line. But with no moving lines, that might indicate that there is a sort of a sense of shock as in a fear. We're constantly afraid that something is going to happen, something dramatic is going to happen, and it doesn't happen, but it does happen. But it's kind of all over the place. There's this potential here. Maybe it's the potential of the thunderstorm. We can feel the air is thick with static. It really feels as if something is going to happen, but there are no moving lines. So maybe it doesn't. And this hexagram thunderbolts, we can get a better idea about it, I believe, by looking at the nuclear hexagram. And the nuclear hexagram is hexagram number 39, which is obstruction. And that suggests that something is stuck. We can't move forward. We can move back. We certainly can't move forward, and so we do feel stuck. And maybe the solution is to move forward via a shock. Sometimes it's a shock that gets us through. On the other hand, the obstruction just might be about that feeling that something is happening, something is about to happen, and we can't move, we can't take any action because we just don't know. And so this hexagram obstruction is, it's not the hexagram I got. It just gives us some concept of what thunderbolts is all about. So maybe we're in a situation where things do feel a bit stuck, and we need to move things on. We know that some kind of shock is required, but the question is the shock actually going to happen today? I think it's more about the fear of a shock, because I think the air is really static, but with no moving lines. How can you have a thunderbolt is sudden? It can't be just stuck in midair, but maybe it can, and maybe that is the feeling of impending doom even. I mean, it's not going to happen, by the way. Well, I'm not really talking about doom, but I do think there is a lot of fear around, and I think that this is perhaps what the I Ching is indicating. And now I want to finish with the astrology, and we have Mars moving into Aquarius. So here is the chart of Mars moving into Aquarius. This takes place, I make it at 9:17 a.m. London time. So that means it takes place at 1:17 a.m. if you're in California, or 4:17 a.m. if you're in New York. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, that would be, I don't know, sometime this evening. So yeah, Mars is moving into Aquarius, and the importance of Mars moving into Aquarius is, well, it certainly adds to the Aquarius emphasis. We already had 4 planets in Aquarius, and now we've got a 5th. So that is as good as it gets. So the moon. The moon is not going to move into Aquarius for a long time. I think that you might think, if you're looking at that chart, you might be thinking that when the moon moves into Aquarius, next moves into Aquarius, there'll be 6 planets in Aquarius, but I don't think that is the case. So if we look at when moon moves into Aquarius, let me just tell you when the moon moves into Aquarius. Moon moves into Aquarius around the 15th, and by that time Venus and Mercury will both be in Pisces. So you're not going to get 6 planets in Aquarius. That's not going to happen. So this is, you could say, is as powerful as it gets. But yeah, Mars is just adding to the pressure. And when we think about Mars, Mars is where we put our energy. What is important to us, at a particular time, and of course it changes. And, when Mars was in Capricorn, a lot of people were perhaps trying to get themselves together after the new year. The Capricorn, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. people trying to be sort of sensible and so forth. But the thing is, but when the moment Mars moves into Capricorn, that means the Earth has gone. There are no planets in Earth signs except for Uranus in Taurus. But Uranus in Taurus doesn't count as being a planet in an Earth sign. I mean, of course it is in an Earth sign, but in terms of elemental balance, I don't count Uranus. Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, they do have a different role, and so that lack of Earth is going to be particularly strong, I think, and particularly as Mars moves into Aquarius. So Mars is in Aquarius at a time when there is no Earth. So Mars in Aquarius may not be particularly practical. Mars in Aquarius is about ideas. It can be about technology. It's about getting excited by the new. And so the sensible nature, the sensible side, Mars in Capricorn, that's gone. And so it may be people pushing ideas which are, maybe not very practical. Thinking about the future. I know it sounds bad that there's going to be no Earth, but maybe that's a good thing in some respects, because we need to move on. We need to start, embracing the future. And if there are planets in Earth, if it's something we're holding on to, we want to have some security, some stability. But maybe we just have to let go of it. And that is what Mars moving into Aquarius is all about. And it's kind of ungrounded. We have an idea. We want to make this idea real. Normally, if there was stuff in Earth, we would hold back. Well, this just isn't practical. But now that there's no Earth, well, we don't have to worry about that. So, a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts, how we can control things. Perhaps people in power having ideas. So. That's one way of looking at Mars in Aquarius. And when Mars moves into Aquarius, it immediately aspects the Jupiter conjunctions, the Jupiter conjunct Saturn chart. So I looked at this a day or two ago. So this is a chart for the moment you had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December the 21st, 2020. This was the beginning of the the new Jupiter-Saturn cycle, which we're now over 5 years into, and Mars is hitting the Jupiter-Saturn. So something going on like right now. I already mentioned that the Sun and Mercury have hit the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, but now Mars is hitting it as well. So we're now really, really starting to see the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction unfold, the real potential of this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And maybe we haven't seen it so far, but I think we have to an extent. I don't want to repeat, some of my sort of ideas, about it. I talked about Russia, but perhaps I don't want to go on and on about Russia. But with this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it is embracing the new, and it's about technology, and it's about things breaking up. This particular Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, I've set this for London, and I think that this chart, when you set the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction for London, it does show how badly things have gone for the UK since 2020, and so Mars crossing the descendant for the UK, for the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction set for the UK, because at the exact time of that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, 0 degrees 40 Leo was rising, and so Mars hitting the descendant is perhaps talking about maybe the UK's enemies, and the fact that it's just a load of problems that the UK is having to deal with. So it's not comfortable, certainly for the UK, but it's about the world as well at large. And so, if you look at the kind of crises that are going on over the next few days, is it going to still be about Greenland? Because we've now heard that Greenland has been sort of resolved, and that, to an extent, but I'm not entirely convinced about that. So we'll see how Mars hitting the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction works. Now, I wanted to just look at a few Mars in Aquarius charts. So as far as Mars in Aquarius events are concerned, so if you're dealing with Mars in Aquarius, you can understand how you might be quite idealistic. You might be thinking about liberation. You might be a liberator. So a supposed act of liberation was the assassination of Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar was assassinated when Mars was in Aquarius. And I think that this was the time. I don't know what time he was assassinated, but I've set the chart for noon. It's interesting. We've just had Cazimi Mercury, but if Julius Caesar was assassinated when the Sun and Mercury were making a Cazimi conjunction in Pisces. But Mars in Aquarius is what you put your energy into, and of course the people who assassinated him, they called themselves the liberators, and that was perhaps an Aquarius thing to do. The assassins, Mars, having ideals, having a set of beliefs. Of course, if they had been successful, I mean, in terms of, if they had not just assassinated him, but if they'd also won the war, the civil war that followed, of course, it would have been perhaps quite Aquarian, a new order. There was a new order anyway, I mean, because it was the end of the Republic pretty soon after. So that's a way in which Mars and Aquarius can be. People having ideals. It's going to change everything. It's going to solve all our problems. Let's assassinate Julius Caesar. What does happen? Well, it brings in the empire, and it really does bring to an end the Republic. And also Harry and Meghan, they got married when Mars was in Aquarius, just as Mars was moving into it. Mars was moving into Aquarius. Now, you might say, if you're a fan of Harry and Meghan, that it was an act of independence. They wanted to break free from the royal family and from Britain, and they wanted to go to America. That would be a way in which Mars in Aquarius might work, but you have to look at its aspects, and you can see that Mars was square Uranus at the time of their wedding. Not a good idea to get married when Mars in Aquarius square Uranus. Certainly hyper independent. I mean, Mars in Aquarius has a certain independent mindedness anyway, but when you throw in Uranus, it becomes almost quite a pathological independent mindedness. You're going to do things your way, and you're not going to be told, and that can be a problem, and that seems to very much characterize their wedding. Mars and Aquarius can also open up new things, which are perhaps the old things. And when the tomb of Tutankhamun was discovered, I think this was a chart when, I don't know, they found a step or something, and so Mars was in Aquarius here. And so Mars in Aquarius, I'm not sure to what extent that fits. I mean, Mars had just gone into Aquarius. It was square Jupiter, so there's a lot of energy and a lot of excitement. Scorpio might represent digging around in graves, and so it certainly was an exciting event, and it did sort of represent the new. As far as people with Mars in Aquarius are concerned, I mean, if you've got Mars in Aquarius, your overall approach might indeed be quite independent-minded. You do things your way, and you will not be told, perhaps. And Bobby Fischer, the chess player, who was world champion after he beat Boris Spassky in Reykjavik in, was it 1972? He had Mars at 0 degrees Aquarius, and okay, maybe to do something different and to be original, you had to have Mars in Aquarius, so perhaps that helped him in his chess. Although you might say, if you're a chess player, I mean, as I said, I'm a very bad chess player, but I think to be a good chess player, you need to be able to visualize pretty well, and having Sun trine Jupiter, Sun in Pisces trine Jupiter in Cancer, that's probably quite a good signature for a chess player, because you've got to have a good brain, but you've also got to be quite sensitive, and you've got to have a good imagination, and you've got to be able to visualize. So I think the Sun trine Jupiter helped. But with Mars in Aquarius, he did things his way, and maybe that Mars in Aquarius says more about his later life after he became world champion. He didn't want to just enjoy being fated as a world champion and have a nice normal life. He did his own thing. He sort of fell out with the chess establishment. I don't think he didn't defend his championship, so he didn't not become champion because he lost any games. He just didn't turn up to things, and so perhaps with Mars in Aquarius, one problem about it is that one perhaps can be too much of an individual, and you can be sort of too much of an individual potentially in quite a destructive way. And turning to other people with Mars in Aquarius, Steve Irwin, the guy who was the Australian who was into snakes. I mean, he was into other stuff. Did he have a zoo? But he would like to play with snakes, and he was quite good at playing with snakes without getting bitten. But when it came to stingrays, that wasn't really his thing, and that's what killed him. So he was, perhaps he should have stayed above the water, maybe. But he certainly had Mars in Aquarius. Mars conjunct the South Node in Aquarius. So, Mars in Aquarius is someone who certainly likes to do things differently. I mean, I don't know a great deal about Steve Irwin, but he was someone who got everywhere, and his Mars was conjunct the South Node, perhaps in a sense taking things too far. I mean, that might be a way. He can do it. He does it his way, and in the end, maybe that led to him dying. So, but probably Mars in Aquarius allowed him to come over as being, an individual. But maybe the problem of his Mars was his square Neptune. You see, Mars square Neptune might say something about his interests in snakes, and I mean, I know there are other things he was interested in, like crocodiles and whatever. But square Neptune, well, Neptune is the god of the sea. There is an association with the sea, and so Mars square Neptune, when he went underwater, when he got close to the stingray, I mean, that's what killed him. And so maybe that Mars square Neptune is saying something about his eventual death. And I mean, I know it's not linked with the 8th house, but if you've got Mars square Neptune in Aquarius, he likes to do things his way. Square Neptune, maybe Mars in Aquarius was kind of overwhelmed by Neptune. And so I think that aspect is probably important. And Mars in Aquarius is capable of doing things which can get one into trouble, but sometimes you have to do it. It is a matter of principle. And one thinks of Julian Assange, who spent sort of ages in a British prison because of WikiLeaks, and he felt he had no choice. I think it was a question of moral obligation to tell everyone what the deep state was doing and to release information. He wasn't doing it for money. He was doing it because it was important to him. And you see, Steve Irwin had Mars conjunct the South Node. Julian Assange had Mars conjunct the North Node, on the IC. So WikiLeaks perhaps going into things deeply, trying to understand the nature of things. And so Mars conjunct the North Node, using his energy in a very independent-minded way, not caring about the consequences, was perhaps the right thing for him to do. So I think that he perhaps used his Mars conjunct Neptune in quite a constructive way. Sorry, not conjunct Neptune, conjunct the North Node. But Aquarius when Mars in Aquarius, you could say if you got Mars in Aquarius, you might be attracted to fascism. I mean, Aquarius is not just about freedom; it's about totalitarianism. As I keep saying, so if you've got Mars in Aquarius, you might just put a lot of your energy into this new totalitarian regime. And Nazi war criminal Julius Streicher, he has Mars in Aquarius. Julius Streicher, in spite of having all of those planets in air, of all the Nazis at Nuremberg, he had the lowest IQ. He had an IQ of 106. And that reminds us that having a lot of air doesn't necessarily mean that you're intelligent. I mean, I know 106 is above average, but of all the Nazis, he had the lowest IQ. And he had Mars in Aquarius. And so where does he put his energy? He puts his energy into Aquarian things, into totalitarian regimes, into Nazism. And Nazi, of course, Hitler came to power when the sun was in Aquarius. So that's him. And it wasn't just his Mars. I mean, he had his sun conjunct Mars in Aquarius, and so that says so much about him. He was just angry. He was into ranting. He couldn't help himself, and his Mars was also square Neptune. So Mars square Neptune in Aquarius, just getting it in fixed sign. Taurus, Neptune in Taurus just kept going. He didn't know when to stop. Probably at the Nuremberg trials, if he'd been more reasonable, he probably could have saved himself, because he didn't. I don't think he actually killed anyone. I mean, he was prosecuted for inciting hatred, but through his speeches and through his journalism. But he wasn't directly involved in war crimes. I mean, for most of the war, he'd already been sidelined. I mean, he had sort of strange interests, and I mean, obviously he wasn't a particularly savoury character. Well, no, but even by the Nazi standards, he was considered to be, not someone who should be given a great deal of responsibility. And so, yeah, he probably could have saved himself if he'd wanted to, but he just kept on being aggressive. Sun conjunct Mars in Aquarius, will not stop, will not show any contrition, and so that perhaps is Mars conjunct Mars in Aquarius, in its most sort of negative light. And finally, there is the poet Langston Hughes. So Langston Hughes, I hadn't heard of Langston Hughes before I came to America, but he's an important African-American poet, or was. I mean, his heyday was the sort of late 1920s, the early 30s. He was part of the Harlem Renaissance, and there was this great sort of cultural sort of outpouring, in New York, particularly in New York, with music and arts and poetry, and Langston Hughes was very much part of it. And he was perhaps a controversial character because some of the material that he would do, he was not someone who just wanted to fit in. His poetry was very provocative. He saw the racism in the South, and he had a real problem with Christianity. I think he was of the view that Christianity was kind of a way to get out of actually standing up against one's oppressors. He saw, for example, African Americans in the South being very deeply Christian, and the Christianity was a kind of a way of dealing with the segregation and persecution. Whereas, of course, from Langston Hughes' perspective, Christianity was not being helpful. Christianity might indeed have been just intensifying the problem because it should have been about resistance. And I think at some stage, he was a communist, and his poetry was often, was very sort of anti-religious. So, for example, he wrote a poem called "Goodbye Christ," and he And the reason he wrote this poem was because he just saw, it wasn't necessarily that he was directly attacking Christ. He was saying, well, he just saw how preachers were making huge amounts of money out of people, particularly in a depression, and he really didn't go for this at all, and he wanted to be critical of it. So, his poem "Goodbye Christ," he says, listen, Christ, you did all right in your day, I reckon, but that day's gone now. They ghosted you up a swell story too, called it Bible, but it's dead now. The popes and the preachers made too much money from it. They've sold you to too many. So you can imagine that someone writing that poem in America in the early 1930s would be incredibly controversial, would get him a lot of criticism. But Langston Hughes, he had Mars in Aquarius. And so if you've got Mars in Aquarius, as we saw with Julian Assange, you do what you have to do. You need to speak out, and you don't care about the consequences. So that might be a way in which Mars in Aquarius works. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.